Welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast, made for women who want their healthiest years to be ahead of them, not behind them. Join your host, Courtney Townley, right now as she breaks down the fairy tale health story you have been chasing all of your life into sensible action steps and lasting change. Hello and welcome to the Grace and Grit podcast. This is your host, Courtney Townley. And as always, thank you so much for showing up here today. I know there's a lot of spaces and places you could be. So the fact that you're here listening to this podcast always means the world. I also want to just put out a special thank you to those of you who have taken the time to head on over to iTunes and leave a review for the podcast. I've gotten a lot of great reviews lately, and I just want to express my appreciation because those reviews really do go a long way in helping us to get more ears on the show. And more listeners means more episodes, really, because we feel supported and we feel the investment we're making towards this podcast is worth the endeavor. So if you have yet to leave a review, I would just love to put it out there that if you would just take, 3 to 5 minutes of your time to rate and review the show on iTunes, it really, really means a lot. Now, for those of you who may be new to the show or who have not been listening to the show the past few weeks, the theme this month on the podcast has been restoration. And we have tackled this topic from so many different angles. We started in week 1. I did a solo episode about why I believe restoration is so important to the health equation, what restoration even is, because it's not just sleep, right? It's anything that helps you to tap into that parasympathetic nervous system, which is that rest and digest state, helps you to kind of lower your cortisol levels and decompress. So that might be a walk on the beach. It might be reading a book. It might be an afternoon nap. It could look like a lot of things. But I tackled why I think restoration is so challenging for so many women this day and age. And I definitely reminded the audience of why it is so imperative to your health. So then in week 2 of this month, I invited my friend Joanna Meneses to the show, and we talked about the restorative power of travel and adventure. And I shared with you an experience that I had in Portugal with her last summer that really helped to restore me and just put me in a very grounded place when I was really in desperate need of it. So that was a really fun episode. I got a lot of great feedback about that. And then last week, I invited my friend, Michelle Rycroft, to the show to talk about a personal challenge that she has been facing and really has been rumbling with, which is the fact that about 8 years ago, Michelle made the personal decision to get breast implants. And in the past several years, she has been inexplicably ill, and she's been doing a lot of research, and she feels very strongly that a lot of her dis-ease in her body is a result of her body having a reaction to her implants. And so she has scheduled an explant surgery. And we talked a lot about the research and a lot about just the community of women that has really come forward and continues to grow that is having an adverse reaction to implants. And I chose her to come, I asked her to come on the podcast this month because that may seem like kind of a far-fetched topic for the topic of restoration, but I don't feel like it was because I really feel that a lot of the decisions that we need to make in order to restore ourselves are often difficult decisions. So I felt like she brought a lot of value to that conversation. And then I also had my friend and colleague, Kieran Ram, come on the show and talk about how instrumental restoration is to rebalancing hormones. Kieran specifically works with the perimenopause and menopausal population. And even if you aren't in that phase of life yet, a lot of what she mentioned and what we discussed in that episode, I think is applicable to every woman, regardless of your age or stage of life. And again, there were just a lot of great reminders in there about the fact that if you're constantly compromising your need for restoration, restoration, you are going to have a lot of negative consequences on the other side of that, specifically hormonally. Because remember, hormones govern the human body. So if your hormonal system is out of whack, you're going to experience a lot of challenges with your brain function, with your immune function, with the ability to maintain muscle mass, the ability to lose weight. Hormones control everything. And restoration has such a powerful impact on our hormonal system's ability to maintain that very fine, happy place. Now, I'm really passionate about the topic of restoration for so many reasons, but I'll say in a nutshell, the reason I dedicated an entire month to the topic of restoration is because this is something that I rumble with a lot with my own clients. I have women coming to me to improve their health, and they're willing to radically change their diet. They're willing to step up their game with exercise. They're willing to work on their mindset. But at the end of the day, a lot of them are unwilling or feel incapable of improving their sleep cycle. And I would argue that until a woman is able to improve her sleep cycle, if she is someone who is seriously sleep deprived, the other stuff isn't going to matter. Because we become so reactive and really unmotivated to do the other work when we're in a constant state of sleep deprivation. So I have long felt that sleep and restoration on any level is incredibly fundamental to the health equation. And a few months ago, a colleague of mine, I teach a class on Friday mornings at 6 a.m. at a local club in Missoula. And a friend of mine who also teaches there brought in a book called Why We Sleep by a gentleman named Matthew Walker. And he handed it to me and just said, I really think you should read this because I think you would love it. And the subtitle of the book is Unlocking the Power of Sleep and Dreams. And I thought, oh, that's kind of cute. It must be about how to interpret dreams or something along those lines. I was completely unprepared for the power of this book. This book, I'm just going to read you the synopsis because I think it does a great job of explaining what this book is about. So this is the synopsis of the book. The first sleep book by a leading scientific expert, Professor Matthew Walker, who is the director of UC Berkeley's Sleep and Neuroimaging Lab. He's a neuroscientist. In this book, he reveals his groundbreaking exploration of sleep, explaining how we can harness its transformative power to change our lives for the better. Sleep is one of the most important but least understood aspects of our life, wellness, and longevity. Until very recently, science had no answer to the question of why we sleep, or what good it served, or why we suffer such devastating health consequences when we don't sleep. Compared to the other basic drives in life, like eating, drinking, and reproducing, the purpose of sleep remained elusive. An explosion of scientific discoveries in the last 20 years has shed light on this fundamental aspect of our lives. Now, preeminent neuroscientist and sleep expert Matthew Walker gives us a new understanding of the vital importance of sleep and dreaming. Within the brain, sleep enriches our ability to learn, memorize, and make logical decisions. It recalibrates our emotions. It restocks our immune system, fine-tunes our metabolism, and regulates our appetite. Dreaming mollifies painful memories and creates a virtual reality space in which the brain melds past and present knowledge to inspire creativity. So, I just think it's such a powerful book. And I just want to say right here, right now, that if you are someone who is not a good sleeper, you are someone who is constantly short on sleep, or you have children or family members that are experiencing some kind of dis-ease in the human body, I cannot emphasize how powerful and well-written this book is. So again, the book is Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. And I want to read you also just a little review that I came across. It's not my review, but I really just thought he did a great job explaining the power of this book. This is by a gentleman named KJ Charles that I just came across on Goodreads. If you're a member of Goodreads, you'll know what I'm talking about. But he says this. He says, this book is genuinely terrifying. The author, who is a sleep scientist, lists the devastating consequences of getting less than 7 to 9 hours regularly. And it's so much worse than you might have thought. So much worse. He says, I'm not even kidding. Just being an hour short on sleep a day will do serious damage to your immune system almost immediately. And the Western world is in the grip of a massive sleep deprivation epidemic. Lack of sleep is a carcinogen, literally. It also destroys your ability to control your emotions and understand those of others, your memory, your creativity. It predisposes you to eat more and put on more weight. Oh, and it is closely linked to ADHD in the young and Alzheimer's for the old. It is such powerful information. At the beginning of the book, Walker writes this kind of pseudo ad, which is comical, but also powerful. The ad says this. It says, scientists have discovered a revolutionary new treatment that makes you live longer. It enhances your memory, makes you more attractive. It keeps you slim and lowers food cravings. It protects you from Alzheimer's, cancer, dementia. It wards off colds and flus. It lowers your risk of heart attacks and stroke, not to mention diabetes. You'll feel happier, less depressed, and less anxious. Are you interested? And of course, anyone reading that book is going to say, hell yes. And it's kind of his way of, joking about the fact that sleep is all of these things. It is the answer. It is the elixir. And yet, we talk about everything in the health industry, right? We talk about diet. We talk about superfoods. We talk about interval training and strength training and the benefit of all these things. And I definitely have felt for a long time, and Walker reiterates this a lot in his book, that we are not tackling this issue of sleep deeply enough. We are not talking about it loudly enough for people to take it seriously. And holy cow, is it serious? So Walker's core argument about sleep deprivation is really that it's a public health crisis. And again, it's grossly underdiscussed. He says that we all need at least 7 and preferably 8 hours of sleep a night, because sleep is essential for the brain and the body to function properly, including memory, problem solving, attention, immune function, growth, and the effective and efficient functioning of most of our organs. Lack of sleep leads to dementia, higher blood pressure, heart disease, stroke, cancer, car accidents. I was fascinated to learn that more accidents are caused by sleep deprivation than alcohol and drugs combined. And yet, so many people in the developed world are not getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night because we kind of look at it as a luxury we can't afford, right? In our culture, we glorify hustle, and we kind of look at sleep or the need for rest as almost being lazy. And Walker points out time and time again in his book that you cannot catch up on lost sleep, which I thought, again, was fascinating because, we've always sort of heard this pervading message in our culture that, oh, you can just catch up on the weekend. If you can go into work a little bit later one day, then you can just sleep later and catch up on your sleep. Well, there's really no such thing as catching up on your sleep. Sleeping late on the weekend will not undo the damage that you've done during the week. If you're someone who has been listening to the podcast for a while, or you've been following me in other spaces and places online, and you're interested in doing a deeper dive into improving your health story, I want to let you know that we are opening the doors to the Grace and Grit Signature Program on April 1st. Now, the Signature Program is a 6-month program with pretty extensive support on many, many levels. You get to coach with me privately. I use a pretty state-of-the-art online classroom that helps to support the education that I'm delivering to you over that 6 months. It's a really remarkable program, and it truly is the meat of the work that I do. So if you have been looking to hire a coach or sign up for some kind of program that is beyond fad dieting and crazy boot camp type classes, I would really encourage you to go on over to graceandgrit.com, check out the programs page, and specifically check out the Grace and Grit Signature Program. Read about the program, and if you feel like it's something that you are interested in, I would strongly encourage you to sign up for a free coaching call with me, an hour-long free coaching call in the month of April. I only do these coaching calls twice a year, just prior to the start of this program, and I do it for 2 reasons. I do it because as someone who's been around the community, I want to be able to give back to you on some level, but I also want to be able to tell you a little bit more about the program. I want to answer any questions that you might have. And most importantly, I want to make sure that we're a good fit to work together. So if you're someone who has been considering working with me on a deeper level, head on over to graceandgrit.com/kickstart. Again, that's graceandgrit.com/kickstart, and you'll be guided through a little questionnaire. And at the end of that questionnaire, you will be directly linked to my online scheduler, where you can select a 1-hour time slot that works for you in the month of April to get on the phone and be coached by me directly. So I really hope that you will be interested, and I hope that we'll be talking sometime in the month of April. Now, I pulled a few quotes from this book because honestly, there's nothing I can say that would be more powerful than reading some of these quotes to you. I just picked out ones that were just really kind of loud and powerful in terms of the messaging in this book. Again, I strongly recommend that you read the book or get the book on like an audiobook so you can listen to it. I also know that Joe Rogan and a few other big podcasters have recently had Matthew Walker on their shows. Rhonda Patrick, for those of you who may know, she has Found My Fitness. By the way, I think she's a phenomenal resource to follow, especially on Instagram. She puts a lot of great information out about just the science of health. And I've just always gotten a kick out of following her. So Joe Rogan and Rhonda Patrick would both be good resources if you want to listen to Matthew Walker being interviewed. But a few of the quotes that I thought you might enjoy hearing about, first and foremost, is this: humans need more than 7 hours of sleep each night to maintain cognitive performance. After 10 days of just 7 hours of sleep, the brain is as dysfunctional as it would be after going without sleep for 24 hours. 3 full nights of recovery sleep, so 3 full nights of recovery sleep, are insufficient to restore peak performance back to normal levels after a week of short sleeping. Finally, the human mind cannot accurately sense how sleep deprived it is when sleep deprived. So I found that really alarming, right? Because a lot of people are touting that, yeah, I get 7 hours of sleep a night. We think that is sufficient. But in most cases, Mr. Walker is actually claiming that 7 hours is definitely not sufficient. And again, he has his hands on like 60 years of sleep research, and he has been in the field of sleep research for the last 20. So this is a gentleman who understands the science of sleep through and through. And the fact that we have a culture of sleep-deprived people who cannot even recognize that they're sleep-deprived, because the brain literally doesn't, like he says, the brain literally cannot accurately sense how sleep deprived it truly is, that's frightening. Because I think that's in large part why so many people normalize sleep deprivation, because they don't actually recognize how sleep deprived they truly are. Another thing Walker says in the book is routinely sleeping less than 6 or 7 hours a night demolishes your immune system, more than doubling your risk of cancer. That's sobering. So if our immune system is not functioning properly, we are basically exposing ourselves to a litany of health challenges, including doubling our risk of cancer. I mean, I don't think there's anything else to say about that except, wow. If that doesn't make you take your sleep more seriously, I don't know if anything will. He also says this: we estimate that more than 50% of all children with an ADHD diagnosis actually have a sleep disorder. Yet, a small fraction know of their sleep condition and its ramifications. A major public health awareness campaign by governments, perhaps without influence from pharmaceutical lobbying groups, is needed on this issue. So this is partly what he speaks to when talking about sleep being a public health crisis. It's affecting our children. He speaks a lot in the book about the fact that, kids are going to bed later at night, partly because it's kind of their alone time, right? Kids are often, spending time with themselves or sometimes, with other kids late at night. And then they're having to get up super early the next morning, right? They have to get up at 6 a.m. to leave the house by 7, to get to school by 7:30. And children are just not getting the amount of sleep they actually need to be as healthy as we'd like them to be. And in a nutshell, Walker says this: the shorter your sleep, the shorter your lifespan. He calls it a sort of a self-induced euthanasia. Like we are literally killing ourselves slowly by robbing ourselves of sleep. Here's another sobering fact. Adults 45 years or older who sleep fewer than 6 hours a night are 200% more likely to have a heart attack or stroke during their lifetime, as compared with those sleeping 7 to 8 hours a night. I read these facts to my husband, who's really not a great sleeper. And it's been so incredible to see him over the past few weeks really making a concerted effort to get himself into bed at a reasonable hour and doing some practices before he goes to sleep to try to get into a deeper sleep cycle. So again, like I said, if you have a family member or someone in your life or even yourself who really struggles to sleep, read this book. I had someone, I brought this, I've been advertising this book just because I think it has so much great information on some of my social media channels. And someone recently said to me, I'm not a great sleeper, but I do take a lot of naps. And I just want to kind of point out that Walker does discuss the power of naps. They are definitely beneficial. And he says that scientists discovered that naps as short as 26 minutes in length still offered a 34% improvement in task performance and more than a 50% increase in overall alertness. So naps are definitely worth pursuing. And I know a lot of my clients over the years have said, I'm just not a great nap taker, but I believe naps are like anything. It's a practice that you can kind of train yourself to become a good napper, but you're probably not just going to lay down one day and go to sleep right away if you've always struggled to take a nap, right? You need to try some different strategies on. You need to let yourself lay down and really just let yourself restore, even if you don't deeply fall asleep. And hopefully over time, maybe you will become a napper. So naps are definitely powerful. And the last quote that I want to read for today's episode is this from his book. He says, the physical and mental impairments caused by one night of bad sleep dwarf those caused by an equivalent absence of food or exercise. In other words, he is saying that sleep is far more important than the absence of food or exercise in terms of how impactful it is to your overall health. So if you're, making great strides to improve your diet and you're like really hitting the gym hard, but you are not getting enough sleep, you aren't really doing yourself any favors. And I'm not saying that your diet doesn't influence your ability to sleep, because I believe it does. And I believe that I have a lot of clients who start working with me that are not exercising at all, that really have a tough time sleeping at night. And as they start exercising, they're actually able to sleep better. So I'm not saying don't exercise and don't eat well if you're not sleeping. I'm just emphasizing that your sleep is more important than your diet or exercise in terms of the research that Walker presents in this book. So, again, I just want to reiterate that the reason I wanted to introduce this book, the reason I so highly encourage every human on the planet to read this book or do some more research around it, is because if you struggle with sleep, I firmly believe that you will struggle in a lot of other areas of your health journey. Because when we're sleep deprived, nothing else really goes well. We don't have a lot of motivation. We become very reactive. We become less productive. And so we kind of convince ourselves that we actually have to work harder and longer. And really, the biggest problem is that we just simply aren't productive with the time we have because we're so sleep deprived. And I also think the more sleep deprived we are, the harder it becomes to rest. Like, we have a really difficult time. It's almost like we train ourselves how not to sleep. I've long said to a lot of clients who come to work with me that say, I'm never hungry. I can eat it. I don't have to eat until 1:00 in the afternoon. And then maybe I could eat something small for dinner, but I just don't have much of an appetite. And I always tell my female clients that say that to me that, well, sure, your metabolism is very trainable. And you have trained your metabolism to not send you hunger signals. And just like you can train your metabolism to not send yourself hunger signals, you can actually train your metabolism to work harder and faster. I have seen this over many, many years of doing health coaching work. And I think the same is true of sleep. We can train ourselves to become worse sleepers, to not feel like we don't need sleep when, of course, we do. Or we can really train ourselves to become better sleepers. It's a practice. And as adults, we've just created some habits that have kind of encouraged us to get out of a good sleep hygiene cycle. But if we start practicing, we can get back to that. And the example I always use is kids, right? When you're raising children or babysitting a child, there's usually a sleep routine that happens to help wind that child down and to help get them psychologically and physiologically ready for bed. And why we don't do that as adults is beyond me. I take my sleep routine very seriously. I have an alarm that goes off on my phone every night to remind me that I have about a half an hour before I need to be in bed. And when that alarm goes off, all my electronics get turned off. I go wash my face. I put my magnesium lotion on my body because it's just something that I do as a ritual. I meditate for just a few minutes. And then I get in bed and I read my book. And honestly, sometimes I read for 5 minutes. Sometimes I read for 20. It just depends on the night. But that routine helps to settle my nervous system and kind of prepare me for a good sleep cycle. I also take magnesium every night. I'm a big believer in magnesium in terms of helping to restore the nervous system. So I'm telling you this because if you are someone who is not great at sleeping or getting enough sleep, the place I would recommend you start is by developing some kind of routine at night to help prepare yourself for getting to bed at a decent hour and getting good sleep. So getting enough quality sleep through the night. If you're someone who only sleeps 4 hours a night, are you going to all of a sudden tonight get 8 hours? Probably not. Sleep is a practice. And I'm a big believer in small circles of expectation. So pick something small that you can do tonight as a tribute to getting a little bit more sleep. I've done a couple episodes, by the way. We did an episode, it was episode 17 of the podcast, which was dedicated entirely to sleep. So I would encourage you to check that out. And I've also written a blog that I will post on the podcast page of the Grace and Grit website where this is found, that also has a lot of tips for how to improve your sleep cycle. But again, I don't know that you necessarily need more information to start, right? That's something we tell ourselves a lot. Like we almost use it as a rationalization for not doing the thing because we tell ourselves we need to know more. You don't need to know more. Write down or think of like 2 or 3 things right now that you know you could do to give yourself a better sleep cycle tonight or to get more sleep tonight. And then do that again tomorrow and do it again the next day. Maybe even keep a journal about your sleep cycle and what's working and what isn't. But honestly, it's just being willing to step into the arena and try some things on. Because your health on every level depends on it. That's all I have for you today. I hope it was helpful. I know it's pretty alarming, some of the stuff that I read, but again, I think we need to be alarmed in order to take back our sleep cycles because it is that serious and it is that important to your overall health. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I hope you'll join me again next week. We're diving into a whole new theme next month, which I am super pumped about. It's all about self-leadership, which I am a big fan of, self-leadership in the health arena. So I hope you will dive into that topic with me, and I look forward to seeing you again here soon. Take care. Thank you for listening to the Grace and Grit podcast. It is time to mend the fabric of the female health story, and it starts with you taking radical responsibility for your own self-care. You are worth the effort, and with a little grace and grit, anything is possible.